we are at the perfect time and the perfect place, showing up with an open mind and all this space. Anything can happen here. We all play a part. Here's an invitation to the center of the heart. Take my hand, here we go. What's the plan? We don't have to go. Take a breath, take a breath, make us start, make us start. Welcome home to the center of the heart. Here we are at the perfect time and the perfect place, showing up with an open mind and all this space. Anything can happen here. We all play a part. We're all in this together at the center of the heart. Take my hand, here we go, What's the plan? We don't have to go. Take a center of the heart. Welcome home to the center of the heart. Welcome home to the center of the heart.
Wow, I love that one. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity of Calgary on this beautiful Easter morning. I have to say, I'm always uplifted when I wake up Easter morning and the sun is shining. It just seems like that's how Easter's supposed to be, is it not? My name is Katie Grinham, and I'm part of the spiritual leadership team here. And it's my delight to welcome you. If it is your first time here with us, we'd love you to get a little bit of that welcome pamphlet, so you have some information about who we are and why it is that we gather here, why it has meaning that we come together. So before we kind of journey any farther into our service, let's take a moment to truly arrive. So let's turn within in what we call an affirmative prayer. So I invite you to close your eyes and just slow yourself down, bringing your awareness to your own heart and feeling the beating of your heart and knowing that that is spirit, that is the life force, keeping you going and engaged in all aspects of your life. And this morning, it's your heart really that brought you here. The part that wanted to connect with more deeply to Spirit, God, Source, however you describe it. Wanted to connect more deeply to yourself and to those who come in spiritual community. So we breathe that in, thankful for our ability to connect. Thank you and thankful for the Easter spirit, for the renewal that we will receive today and every day as we turn within. And for this, we are truly grateful, and so it is. Great. So we have a statement, and this is our statement of love that anchors that energy in. And I invite you to affirm it together.
We are here as love, to celebrate the one power, the one presence in our lives, in this community, and in the universe.
And I would like to call up Erin, and I'm going blank on how to say her last name. Feel. See? Very good. She'll correct me up here. And she's going to read our daily word. And the daily word is a publication that has been put out by Worldwide Unity for over 100 years. And it is a bit of information that you can read on a daily basis to keep your mind focused and in the flow on those positive thoughts that will enrich your life.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So today's daily word is, of course, Easter. I am resurrected into the light, life, and power of God. The Gospel of Matthew shares that the women who discovered the empty tomb on Easter morning left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. On the way, Jesus appeared to them, stating, "Tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." Charles Fillmore explains, every time we rise to the realization of eternal indwelling life, making union with the Father mind, the resurrection of Jesus takes place within us. On Easter Sunday, I rise from the tomb of limitation. I follow Jesus to Galilee, the rich consciousness of vitality that becomes mine when I fully accept my Christ nature. I am resurrected into the life, light, and power of God. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." Matthew 28:10.
Thank you. My techie. Thank you, Chad.
Someone's got to do it.
Thank you, Erin. That was Erin's first time.
Yay! If
you would like to bring your voice and your presence up front, we'd love to have you. It really is actually a declaration of being willing to share yourself. So we hope you take that opportunity and sign up on the bulletin board. And as you heard in that reading, Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore are the founders of the Unity Worldwide movement, which is actually a prayer and educational movement. It was never meant to be a church, though we have 900 centers around the world. It's always been about the sense of empowering people and empowering each individual. And we believe that Jesus was our way shower, someone who lived that absolutely wholly, fully, and completely. And there's so much to be learned from him. And the nature of him is called the Christ. So it's not his last name, as many of us have been taught, but really it is the consciousness, and Reverend Doug is going to be talking more about that. So today we're strengthening that consciousness in ourselves as we renew and know that this energy is powerful, renewing, and inspiring. Unity has a vision. We believe that if everyone were in touch with the fact that we are spiritual beings, that we would treat each other differently, and there would be less suffering, more love, and more joy in our world. So let us affirm together our vision.
We envision a world powerfully transformed through the growing movement of shared spiritual awakening.
And how we do that here at Unity of Calgary is our mission. So let's affirm that together.
We are a welcoming, vibrant spiritual community that inspires hearts and transforms lives by expressing our divine essence.
So if that resonates with you, if you have a sense that as we become more who we are, the world becomes a richer place, perhaps you have journeyed in to the right place to be sharing Easter. And now we're going to have some music with Vivian Martin and the Unity Band.
Yeah, flip through. I put it in the wrong spot when they changed it out this morning.
And which one are we doing first?
Rose.
We are doing the Rose first. So this is, many of you would recognize this song as a Bette Midler tune, and we are going to be sharing it from a different perspective this morning. Please welcome Vivian Martin and the Unity Band.
I have to say that when Rev requested this song, I was like, well, that's interesting because as well known as this song is, I've never really performed it live. So thank you. This is the virgin performance of the Rose for me.
The Rose, she's known.
Some say love, it is a river that drowns the tender reed. Some say love, it is a razor that leaves your soul to bleed. Some say love
that this morning, Reverend Doug Craig, who often shares with us at least once a month. He is well versed in New Thought, and part of the New Thought movement for well over 35 years. He brings a heart, a passion for living these words. Like, how do you live it? How do you go out into the world and not just read about or think about these things, but how do you embody them? And so I'm always delighted with the very practical message that he brings. And this morning will be no exception, as he talks about the Easter story from a metaphysical point of view. And meta means greater than the physical. So we're looking at it from the idea of consciousness, which he'll be talking about a little bit more. And once we do that, then we'll be moving into what we call the flower ceremony. And those of you who have been with us before know that this is a very personal and deep moment when you get to get renewed and connected within. So I invite you to open your hearts and minds as we journey in and welcome Reverend Doug Craig.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are we all doing this morning? Yeehaw, good show. Hey, so whenever a person plans to do something, have you ever planned to do something that didn't turn out the way you planned it? And the way it turned out was better than what you could have done? Well, Katie and I planned to do the song at the end of the talk, not the beginning. So the band decided to do it at the beginning, and actually that was really a good place to start. Because this whole process of transformation and renewal and change within us is really, before we get into the Jesus experience, was really exemplified in that song. Because you got that snow and then you got that darkness, but that seed of life is in there just waiting for the sun's love in the spring. And that's just like you and I. We've got that life in us. And sometimes in the darkness of change in our experience, we just got to believe in that and stay with it, and then the light comes and we move forward. That seems to be how it works, you know. And so not only does it work that way in this example, but it works that other ways in mythology. For example, in Greek and Egyptian mythology, they talk about the bird of good luck, which is a phoenix. And at the end of its term, the phoenix sits itself upon a wooden funeral pyre, ignites itself into flames, and is burned into flames, and out of the ashes rises the new phoenix to bring another 500 years of good luck. So it might sound like a brutal process, but that is to exemplify the purification and the release of the old, and then there's that gestation period, and then the rise. So let's take it back to nature, the way God talks to us about it. See if we could get that one. And it's really simply the best example of all to see it clearly is the caterpillar and the butterfly. Okay, so there's something that drives that caterpillar within itself to change. Just like you and me. There's something that drives us to change. And it doesn't know, but it goes through this process of the cocoon. And it has to go through the process of giving up who and what it was to become who and what it is. Okay? And in that process, there's that darkness. So that's like the tomb. I like to say that maybe they could have added something on that. Let's call it not only the tomb, but the womb. Because within that old going, the new is born again. And you know, just like the newness with the caterpillar turning to the butterfly struggling, there is a struggle, and sometimes it's painful. So the joy and ease part of this is acknowledging and knowing that and learning how to manage that rather than fighting it and saying it that I want a joy and ease. I'm sure any of the ladies that ever given childbirth will tell us about that joy and ease part. Ask them. I'm not even going to go any further with that one, okay? So we then come back to the great demonstration of the greatest teacher ever that we know of, which was Jesus. And knowing that what he was going to go through, and told everybody, it was a teaching experience for us to see that the trauma and the tragedy of the outer conditions and circumstances and the changes that we've got to go through don't look good and are sometimes very dramatic and sometimes not. They're just regular stuff. But the process is always the same. And so then in the tomb, that's the period where we're really just finally getting rid of the old and embracing the new, and then we just struggle to get through that process, and then whoosh, we're resurrected. So we go through that on small scales all the time with our change, and on bigger scales too. Bigger ones we call transformation, the smaller ones change. So the cross is symbolic in metaphysics of the crossing over from the realm of the material to the spiritual. And the 7 things that Jesus said while he was on the cross gives us a little bit of an idea and guidance about what we need to do in the process of change. Whether we choose to change, whether physically I'm changing because I'm getting older, or whether change is brought upon us by circumstances, situations, matters not. Okay, we all go through it. And so here are the 7 things that are very important. And in that, some of them are no strangers. Number 1, Jesus says in Luke chapter 23, verse 34, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And that's the key, folks, is forgiveness. We've got to be neutral with our energy and feeling towards people. If we can love them, hurrah. If we can like them, hurrah, but we don't have to. We have to be neutral. And the first one that we got to really work on, all the rest of that don't matter. You can work on everybody else all you want. If you ain't going to look in the mirror and do that one, it's not going to work, because that really clutters up the channel. So we got to work at forgiving ourselves, okay? Especially for some of the positions and conditions we get into. Ooh. Second thing, you got to give up your old way of thinking and make a commitment to change your ways. In Luke chapter 23, verse 43, Jesus is on the cross there, and on one side he's got a bandit, and on the other side he's got a bandit, right? And so one of them's mocking him and taunting him. Yeah, look what this got you, eh? See what it got you? Well, maybe other things, I don't know, just, And then the other guy says, hey, I made a lot of mistakes in that, and, I really believe in you. Is there any opportunity for me at this stage of the game? Sort of something like that, right? And Jesus looked at the man and knew that he was sincere, and he said, verily I say unto thee, today thou shalt be in paradise. Okay? It was an easy thing for him to say, because the man had already declared and accepted that by asking. So we've got to make a commitment to change our ways. And once we do that, it doesn't matter what stage of the game we are, things happen different. And that's not just loose lips saying it. We got to be 100% committed. We got to be the pig, looking at the bacon and egg sign, looking at it, chicken saying that's a contribution for me, and the pig says, yeah, it's a commitment, totally for me. Okay? So we got to be a pig about this when we're going to make a commitment to make change. Not a chicken. Okay, so the third thing, in John chapter 19, verse 26 and 27, Jesus is there and he's looking at his mother and one of the disciples. And he looked at his mother and he said, woman, behold thy son. And then he looked at the disciple and he said, behold thy mother. And so what he's telling us here is we have to accept responsibility for our human obligations, no matter what's going on in our life. You know, if we have a child or a pet or some people in our life, we have a commitment to fulfill our obligations to them, and we have a commitment to fulfill our obligations to ourselves and what's going on around us that is important. We can't just step back and get away from it all. And so in those days, one of the things is the parent was always looked after by the child as they grow older. It's still common in many cultures today. And so he was passing that responsibility to look after his mother over to his disciples, so he was fulfilling his human obligations. And we need to make sure that we take care of business and don't let all of it go. And it would be easy sometimes when we're really down, but we got to do that. The next thing, Jesus said in Mark chapter 15, verse 34, and this is what brings it down to you and me. He said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So even though he was that highly evolved spiritual being, he was still in a human body. And no matter what, no matter who you are and how hard you've been working, every now and again we lose it. Okay? That is going to happen. Okay? Doesn't matter what. The fact is just let yourself experience it and then don't feed the fire. We have a tendency to want to beat ourselves up when we do that. Oh, I never get it done. Look at me. I was going good and then I'm off now. Blah, blah. And then we carry it on. We can't do that. We've got to know that that's going to happen. So what he's teaching us for the fourth step in crossing over is persist until you succeed. Don't give up. Okay? Then he's there and he says, I thirst. And he's talking about drinking of the water of life, the truth of our being, and standing strong in our faith. And as we do that, we could deal with any condition. So he says, maintain your faith during duress. Because, you know, folks, when things aren't going right, there's only really, sometimes you get to that point where it doesn't seem like you got nothing, but you always got one thing. And that's the Spirit in you. And we must activate it by believing it. And that's our faith, standing in it. And knowing that there will be a way, there will be an answer, and there will be a guidance. I've done that many times in my life, and I've never been let down. Never, not once. The only time it hasn't worked as quite as well is when I get my stuff in there. Analyzing and all that other stuff, you know. So you got to maintain your faith when this is happening. Then the sixth step is in John chapter 19, verse 30, when he says, it is finished. And so that's what we talk about when we do our affirmative prayer and our treatments. It's the acceptance that the work we've done is now a reality and will be and is coming into form. So that's the acceptance of that spiritual work. And so that goes with the faith. We stand in the acceptance of it. And then the last step, folks. The last step, he says, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. So the last step is surrender. The power of surrender. I remember when I first come to that was one of those steps of surrender. Not me. I tell you, I really had an issue with that for about 3 or 4 months till I got beat up really good by life, and then I surrendered. Oh, that's what it means. Okay, I got that now. So it's turning it over, because it's not turning it over to something outside yourself. Get off that one. Don't think that at all. Never. It's turning over to something that's inside you and outside you, everywhere. But it's inside you, part of you, working for you. It's your own unique individualization of the Spirit, and you're turning it over to that. And that will guide you and give your answer. So those are the 7 steps of crossing over from the material to the spiritual. And then there's that other part there. That's the 3 days in the tomb when everything just... I was just talking with someone this morning before we started about they were doing all the work, and now they've done everything, and they did the acceptance of the surrender, and now it's not happening, or is it happening? And you get into those stages when you've done what you need to do, but doesn't seem like something's happening, or there's a lot of other stuff happening. So you kind of get into the darkness of the experience, the tomb. And so when you're in there, what one has to do is practice non-resistance. Don't fight with our mistakes. And don't fight with our experience of the change. So leave the guilt, let it be itself. Leave the doubt, fear, criticism, self-condemnation. Leave the lack of trust, and don't slip away from your faith. So it's non-resistance. You say, well, how comes that? Well, when you feed any of those, then you're resisting it. So you're giving it power. When you just let it happen and pass through you, it can't stay there unless you entertain it. It just doesn't work that way. So don't give it a place for it to hang its hook. Doubt's going to pass through you. Yeah, let it go. It can't stay unless you feed it. Fear can't stay unless you feed it. Worry can't stay unless you feed it. None of that stuff is natural. It can't stay unless you feed it and invite it to stay. So don't resist it by feeding it. Let it flow through you. It's not a thing of its own unless you make it. Realize your divine ideal. Hold on to the transforming idea, and hold on to that idea that my soul knows where I need to go and what I need to do to experience peace, prosperity, fulfillment, and happiness. Hang on to that idea in the change, and that turns it over to that different level, and then have your demonstration. What do you mean? I'll just take it when it comes. Oh, will you? Oh, will you? One of the greatest things people have is they're working on something and stuff starts happening, and they come to me and they talk to me. Well, I wanted this happening, and this is going up, and I don't think I'm ready. And I just need to know, am I ready? Has anybody ever asked that? It's simple. Get this. If it's happening, you're ready. Well, how do you know? Well, you wouldn't have it happening if you weren't ready. It doesn't matter what you think. If you start doing what you think, it ain't going nowhere. And that's that soul afraid of whatever it was. Come on, the soul afraid of living. Dying. Okay, the soul afraid of dying, that becomes afraid to live. That's what we become. So those are the key indicators that I got it right here, by the way. That we must remember and garner from the Easter experience. Okay, it's there to give us something of value for ourselves, and it was done in such a dramatic way so that we would hopefully get the message. And I think that if you want to look at the Easter experience this way, it may bring new meaning and understanding for you, hopefully anyhow. And just remember, in the winter, far beneath the bitter snow, lies the seed that with the sun's love, in the spring becomes the rose. And I see each and every one of you being that sun's love for that seed within, bringing into bloom whatever it is that you cherish and desire to be and experience in life. So as I declare that for myself and for you, I accept it to be so, and so it is. So it is.